This one is hard. I feel like this video should have a trigger warning. Mothers that lived in heavily PFAS contaminated areas had 3 times higher first-year infant mortality versus mothers that didn't have heavily contaminated drinking water. So a group of researchers wanted to look at what impact PFAS had on infant mortality. Using data on New Hampshire births from 2010 to 2019, we show that mothers receiving water that had flowed beneath a PFAS-contaminated site, meaning high rates of PFAS contamination, had 191% higher first-year infant mortality. That's almost 3 times higher likelihood of infant mortality, okay? They also had 168% more births, almost 3 times more births before 28 weeks of gestation, okay? And again, 180% more births with weights below 1,000 grams. So we already know that PFAS is linked to many birth complications, low birth weight, preterm birth. What has never been shown before is the increased risk of infant mortality. And the fact there is almost 3 times higher risk of infant mortality is really hard, especially considering how prevalent PFAS are in our drinking water. This is why I say over and over again, you need to get a water filter. There are cheap water filters that remove PFAS from your water. PFAS contamination imposes an annual societal burden of approximately $8 billion. That is more than the cost that it would take to filter PFAS out from your drinking water on a municipal level. The EPA under the Biden administration had put limits on PFAS in our drinking water. We're going to provide funding and mandate that communities remove PFAS from their drinking water. And probably the most frustrating part is that the Trump administration is now not going to enforce PFAS limits in our drinking water, and they are not providing funding to remove PFAS from our drinking water. And so this will continue to happen and get worse. That's the part that is just enraging. So in this study, they just looked at New Hampshire because New Hampshire has had a lot of PFAS water contamination because of St. Gobain. However, this part of New Hampshire doesn't even have the highest amounts of PFAS in their drinking water. Miami, Fresno, Bergen County, New Jersey, where I grew up partially, those places have just as high, if not higher. And there's lots of parts of the country that we haven't even tested yet. Any place that's close to a military base. And the most horrible part is that Trump is just not enforcing PFAS contamination levels in our drinking water. So this will just get worse because that's the thing with PFAS. PFAS are known as the toxic forever chemical, and they build up in and around the water supply. And so if you're not filtering them out and they just keep going back in the water supply, like they're never going to get destroyed. So people always get defensive and angry when there's information that they don't like and no one else is talking about this. This is going to be another thing that everyone just ignores in the media. If you knew that there was something that your government was doing that made you 3 times more likely to lose your baby in the first year, I think you would be enraged too. You get a water filter. It doesn't need to be expensive. That's the only way to know you're actually getting clean water. I'm sorry that I even have to share this news. I'm sorry.